We added another new name to the list of Ginetta Junior champions yesterday here at Donington Park. Rocco Coronel sealing the championship with 2 races to spare. But we do still have 2 races to bring you today with relatively few points battles, at least towards the top end of the championship standings to worry about. We can just see the Ginetta Junior drivers put on a show at one of the best tracks in the country for Ginetta Junior racing historically. Yesterday's race was a very tense affair. A sensational 5-way battle for 3rd place was really the centre of attention. That included Rocco Coronel, who was able to score just enough points in the end to seal the championship, and he is electing now to watch from the sidelines for the rest of the weekend, as I sort of predicted would be the case, not wanting to run the risk of getting involved in any on-track incidents that could lead to things like penalty points, which then can't be counted as drop scores, etc. Actually hearing, though, that Rocco Coronel perhaps is not here at the track. He's already been shipped off to Holland, where he's conducting TV interviews to discuss his recent success. So a little bit of a Dutch superstar, I think, in the making is Rocco Coronel. We've been saying that all year long, and he's got the family name as well, which, of course, only further attracts attention to him, but he's now got the accolades to back it as well, with a championship victory in one of the most competitive junior championships in the world. As I said then, he won't be taking part in the final 2 races, but we do have still some intriguing battles to be had, and lots of drivers who are, quite frankly, quite happy that he's not on the grid, because it might give them an opportunity to get their first win of the season. Rocco Coronel has won 11 of the 23 races this season, most of those in one long, unbroken run of victories through the middle part of the season. He's had 19 podiums from 23 races, so good opportunity now for somebody else maybe to get up there and get their first win of the season. Torin Byrne is one of those drivers, winless so far this year. Jarrett Clark alongside on the front row has yet to get a podium this season, and we'll see this as a golden opportunity to change that. George Proudfoot-Nalder probably should have won yesterday, but an engine blow-up with a corner to go meant that he was a non-finisher. He starts 3rd alongside Scott Lindblom, with American Ethan Carney and Fred Green, runner-up in the championship this year, starting on row 3. Row 4 then for Max Cuthbert and Harry Bartle alongside, another looking for a first podium finish of the season. Lewis Goff and Noah Young, meanwhile, will complete the top 10. Row 6 then for Josh Henry, with Jesse Phillips alongside. Andrew Robinson and Emilio Del Grosso share the 7th row of the grid. Row 8 then for Matthew Chihuahua for Tim Gray Motorsport, and another one of the elite brigade, Revy Lake, on row 8. Row 9 for Henry Cameron and Vladislav Tomenchuk, with Josh Watts and Colin Cronin on the back row of the grid. Colin Cronin, because he had lap times disallowed in qualifying yesterday, so he actually didn't set a 2nd fastest lap time, which is what this grid is formed by. And Josh Watts alongside him apparently woke up yesterday feeling very ill, nearly didn't race, and ended up on the road in the early stages, went through the gravel trap and recovered quite nicely in the end. So hopefully he's feeling a little bit less under the weather this morning and ready for another battle from the back of the grid. Torin Byrne then. Torin Byrne, 2 podium finishes so far this season. One of those came here, actually, in this equivalent race at the start of the season, the 2nd of the 3 races at Donington Park. He was 3rd position, but another 3rd place at Snetterton in the middle part of the year. But Torin Byrne yet to win a race, and might now see this as an opportunity, one of the best opportunities all season to change that. Was supposed to be starting 2nd on the grid, Torin Byrne, but with Rocco Coronel's withdrawal, they've moved everybody up a position, because Rocco was supposed to start on pole, but has withdrawn now for the remainder of the event, and so he's not just a non-starter, but he is deleted from the grid sheet, if that makes sense. So Byrne and Clark on the front row. Jarrett Clark yet to finish on the podium. George Proudfoot-Nalder, maybe, though, hungrier than anybody else to get that first win of the year, because of how close he came yesterday. And the MDD squad with whom he runs had such a roller coaster of emotions within the space of half an hour. They lost a victory in the Ginetta Junior Championship and then won the Ginetta GT Championship. It was a really, really strange afternoon for MDD, but the team have done a fantastic job to get the car ready to go, and it will be starting from 3rd place. And George Proudfoot sort of dominated yesterday, and will be looking to hit the front early and do the same in this one. So place your bets, everyone. Who's going to win the 23rd round of the Ginetta Junior Championship? The red lights are on, out they go, off they go, and it's a pretty even start this time from the front row drivers. Remember, it was George Proudfoot yesterday who got a storming start around the outside to get the lead into Redgate. Not going to happen in this one, though. They fan out then as they arrive into the braking zone at Redgate corner, but it's grid order for the top 4, maybe 5. Ethan Carney battling with his teammate. There's a spin in the middle of the pack. Did everyone avoid them? I think so. It is the number 6 car that went around. That's Andrew Robinson, but he thankfully has managed to get going again without any further damage being done. You can see there was a lot of damage done to Ethan Carney's number 53 car yesterday. That's got a whole new front end, which does not match the rest of the car. He's still battling with his Elite Motorsport teammate Fred Green, and they go side by side up the hill. Fred could have done with some Elite Motorsport teammates yesterday to help him out. He was the lone Elite Ranger battling all the R-Racing cars. There's an R-Racing car going for the lead now, though. Jarrett Clark sort of peeking up the inside of Torin Byrne, who wants to close the door, but Jarrett Clark is very much in that gap and has the inside line into Coppice corner. Lindblom goes 3rd, but George Proudfoot sets himself up to perhaps go from 4th to 1st. What a switchback move that was from the Aussie. He took a deliberately wide line into Coppice and carried so much more speed through the corner that he, I believe, has got into the lead of the race. Ethan Carney now goes up the inside of Scott Lindblom, who's been properly hung out to dry, but it is George Proudfoot who leads and then gets it all wrong into the chicane. So does Lindblom, who rejoins right behind, and now side-by-side battle for the lead, because that slow run through the chicane for Proudfoot has allowed Jarrett Clark to his inside, to the outside Torin Byrne. We're on board with Fred Green. Where do you go? They're 3 abreast and banging doors in front of us. It is Clark who will exit the Melbourne hairpin, the leader, and now Fred Green is sandwiched in the middle. We've got Ethan Carney to the right, somebody else over to the left. This is proper last day of school fields, isn't it? We saw exactly the same sort of thing at Brands Hatch last year when the championship had been wrapped up early in the weekend. The remaining racing was some of the best we've had all year. The gloves came off, and I think the same is going to happen today here at Donington Park. So Jarrett Clark will lead the opening lap of the race, and Scott Lindblom, who was about 5th down the back straight, is now going for 2nd place, but George Proudfoot gets across to cover that. There's a big dive up the inside from Max Cuthbert on Ethan Carney. There's contact. Oh, and around they both will go. I think Carney might have saved that had he not been served from behind by a car that couldn't get out of the way, and Ethan Carney was going around anyway. That was a big squeeze into the corner. There's been a delay as well for Harry Bartle by the looks of it in the 73. That is Scott Lindblom back to the inside of Proudfoot and Fred Green just methodically trying to work his way up through the pack. He's alongside the MDD racing car. That's the outside for the kinks at Starkey's and Schront's curve, but that becomes the inside line for McLean's corner, and that should benefit Fred Green when we get to the top of the hill. It does, and George Proudfoot quite keen to get back in line before Torin Byrne gets involved. The pole sitter, ending up 5th at the end of the opening lap, will be a little bit disappointed with that. So a couple of early dramas have sort of split the pack, haven't they, really? You've got that leading group of 5, then about half a dozen or so of them in this battle. Lewis Goff is one of those, the number 4 car. I think he might have been the one that tapped into the car at Redgate corner. There's a lot more tapping going on. Emilio Del Grosso, that was, being sort of playing the role of the ping-pong ball in between 2 cars. Noah Young was one of them in that black and blue number 95 car, which is still up the inside. Del Grosso has to take the shortcut, which doesn't really lose you a lot of time, but it will put a lot of dirt on his tyres now as they head down into the braking zone at Melbourne. He's no time to think about that, though, because there's more squeezing going on now as Lewis Goff tries to hold on to that position. Josh Henry, I think that was, steaming up the inside in the blue and black Elite Motorsport car. And really, really good racing. Revy Lake joining in as well. This is a proper Ginetta Junior battle, isn't it? And they still haven't sorted it out as they arrive at Goddard. Big lunge up the inside from someone, and around goes Emilio Del Grosso. That was contact, I think, from Noah Young, and secondary contact as the car sort of rolled backwards into the road. Who did he get? Was it the 6 of Andrew Robinson, perhaps? There's damage to the front of another one of the cars in that group. That's Revy Lake, is it? 83, which has sustained a bit of damage. So it's all kicking off in the midfield. The leaders are sort of staying a little bit calmer, aren't they? Jarrett Clark not fully escaping from Scott Lindblom and Fred Green. But these two might be tempted now just to work together for a half a lap or so, slipstream their way back up onto the tail of the leader, which they should be able to do by the time we arrive at McLean's, because this is a really steep, long drag up the hill. The slipstream will bunch them together. Jesse Phillips is off, or was off, at Redgate, has now rejoined. Fred Green slips to the inside of Scott Lindblom. Having closed back in on the leader, he then decided it was the time to pounce, and Fred Green moves into second position. His second place in the championship is secure. He's 175 points ahead of Alfie Slater, who's not here this weekend. So Alfie Slater third in the championship, not able to race at Donington. And so Fred Green can sort of throw caution to the wind in a way. It doesn't really matter what happens today. He will end up the runner-up in the championship at least. But it is our racing's Rocco Coronel who is celebrating the championship already. George Proudfoot-Nalder there, busy battling with Torin Byrne. Now, George hasn't had the opportunity in this race to get away like he did yesterday. Like I said, he started on the front row in race one, got the lead at turn one, and as they all battled behind, the championship contenders principally, he was able to distance himself from the chasing pack, but not have the same luxury today. Someone's on the grass, that's Jarrett Clark. And that was Scott Lindblom up the inside, which means that Fred Green has got the lead. So Fred Green has got himself ahead of Jarrett Clark, and so too has Scott Lindblom. And Scott Lindblom, another driver yet to win. He's had 7 podium finishes this year, Scott Lindblom, with 2 of them being second places and 5 third places. Well, he's back in second now, is the Swedish driver. But he is another wanting that maiden victory. In fact, if you look at this lead group, Fred Green, of course, has won. He's won 7 times this year, but Lindblom hasn't, Clark hasn't, Proudfoot-Nalder hasn't, and has Colin Cronin? No, Colin Cronin hasn't either in 5th. Nor has Torin Byrne. So, in fact, the only race winner in this group, really, is the race leader, Fred Green. Will that give him the advantage, maybe, that extra winning experience that he's had this year? Or will somebody else be able to beat him? Didn't actually get his first victory, though, until the 9th race of the year, did Fred Green. Now, that's largely because Rocco Coronel won all of the other races at the start of the season, apart from race 1 here at Donington, won by Alfie Slater. Then it was Rocco Coronel who kept on winning until finally Fred Green beat him in one of the Donington Park races. And from there, Fred really started to be the man in form through the middle part of the season, notching up quite a number of successive victories. Croft, last time out, the penultimate event, he did the hat-trick, won all 3 races. Rocco Coronel had a bit of a nightmare, but he'd put the foundations in already that season. At the start of the season, sorry, had Rocco Coronel to mean that he could afford an off weekend at Croft and still came to Donington the clear favourite. But Fred Green, I think, might have to hurt for this one. Bit of a wobble there for Lindblom and indeed from Cronin behind. They've sort of separated into 2 trios now, haven't they? Green, Lindblom and Clark for the lead. And then Proudfoot-Nalder, Torin Byrne and Cronin battling for 4th. But it's all changing again now as Jarrett Clark slips back to the inside of Lindblom at the Melbourne hairpin. Cronin defending there from Torin Byrne, hangs on to 5th. And they make their way uphill towards Goddard's once again, about 1/3 of the way through this penultimate round of the championship. And if they keep on battling in that leading group of 3, it could very quickly become a 6-way fight. And I think this might just be the lull in the middle of the race before it all starts kicking off again a bit later on. Keep an eye to Lewis Goff as well. Lewis Goff, the number 4 car in 7th position. He's on his own, but he's setting some decent lap times. He is every bit as quick as the cars in that lead group. So if they do start tripping over each other, he's only about 3 seconds behind. And he'll be really hoping that that happens, because he's having a lonely race up until this point. He's sort of escaped some of the midfield shenanigans and hasn't quite been able to latch onto the leaders just yet. So he's in no man's land ahead of a 3-way fight going on behind him. Back into the race, by the way, has gone Jesse Phillips. Just seen him rejoining outside the commentary box window. Phillips, though, is a lap down. Emilio Del Grosso is in the pit lane, but all of the drivers involved in those early skirmishes were at least able to recover to the pits. So no need for a safety car. Scott Lindblom, outright fastest first sector and fastest of anybody in the speed trap at the end of sector 1. And looking now to either put the moves on Jarrett Clark, or I suspect maybe work with his R-Racing teammate to close in on Fred Green, who once again finds himself with no help from teammates. If Colin Cronin could get up there, then maybe that would change. By the way, Colin Cronin started 20th and last on the grid and is in 4th position now. He's just moved ahead of George Proudfoot-Nalder. So that yellow and black Elite Motorsport car, that's the one that really is charging. There he is, look, ahead of Proudfoot-Nalder. And George, I think, would do well here to latch on to that yellow and black machine and try and push him up towards the lead group, which I think he's trying to do. The leaders are battling meanwhile, and Jarrett Clark has now caught Fred Green. looks to the outside at Melbourne, not able to get through, but just by forcing the leader to defend, that slows this lead group up. It gives the chasing cars an opportunity to gain some time. And again, they all take very different lines into Goddard's. Defensive for Green, very wide line for Jarrett Clark, tries to turn into the late apex, but finds a Scott Lindblom in the way. And they just traded a little bit of paint there, the two R-Racing teammates. Across the line we go. Colin Cronin, you won't be shocked to hear, has just set the fastest lap of the race, a 55.5, half a second quicker than the leader. And look, he's getting away from Proud Fernalda. So Colin Cronin, again, winless so far this year, is now looking like the big threat, isn't he? Jarrett Clark back to the inside, is squeezed onto the grass by Fred Green through Hollywood. That was very fortunate that neither car ended up pointing in the wrong direction there. It loses Jarrett Clark second place, but that's a dangerous place to be making contact. You see it quite often, though, because the switchback move at Redgate Corner is a very common one. And if you are the driver in danger of being overtaken, you really want to get back over to the right-hand side of the road to cover as quickly as possible. Sometimes, though, the other car has an overlap. Scott Lindblom, though, having taken advantage of that, has immediately started to ask some serious questions of the race leader himself. So Lindblom now looking to try and get into the lead of the race. In the first sector alone, they've lost 0.3 of a second to Cronin, and they're about to lose more because Lindblom tried to squeeze to the inside at Coppice there, delayed both he and Fred Green. They made contact on corner exit, and I think Jarrett Clark will have the race lead. Here, though, comes Cronin. Cronin pulls to the outside line as well. Well, not really, actually, sort of hold the middle ground. Clark goes to the lead, but it is very much now 4 cars for the race lead, and Jarrett Clark parks the car on the way into the chicane, and that will bring Torin Byrne and George Proud Fernalda into play. Look at the momentum from Byrne. Tried to squeeze up the middle. Colin Cronin, having none of it, managed to close the door, and that just scuppered Torin Byrne's momentum off the turn. This is a proper battle now, though, and Lewis Goff in 7th will be rubbing his hands with glee because he's also now going quicker than this leading group of cars. Bash, big bit of contact there between Cronin and Byrne, but Byrne keeps his foot in it and ploughs through the grass to maintain the inside line into the Goddard hairpin. We still have nearly 8.5 minutes of this race to go, so this is far from over. Across the line we will go then. Cronin having very much now become a part of this battle, and then ironically immediately lost a position to the charging Torin Byrne. What's the gap back to Goff? It is 2.7 seconds between 6th place George Proud Fernalda and 7th place Lewis Goff, but on the previous lap he did a 56.2. That was 1.9 seconds quicker than the race leader, and that is mainly because they're battling so hard. It was a decent lap for Lewis Goff. It was only a 1/10 of a second away from his personal best, but the main reason for the gain in time was all of the action that was going on at the front of the pack. So Torin Byrne and Colin Cronin, 4th and 5th overall. They're the top 2 junior class drivers. No difference in performance of car, but just experience of driver. The junior class is for non-rookies, basically. And then, shockingly, the rookie class is for those in their debut season in the championship. Fred Green is one of them, and he takes the race lead and class lead, therefore, away from Jarrett Clark at McLean's. Scott Lindblom will once again try to take advantage of that, and there Cronin slips to the inside of Torin Byrne's car at Coppice. George Proud Fernalda says, "Thank you very much, I'll follow you through as well." But he might not have a slipstream down the back straight look because Cronin pulls to the inside of the road to give a draft to Torin Byrne because he wants to keep those 2 cars side by side behind him. They're not actually side by side, though. Torin Byrne's cleared Proud Fernalda and will hold on to 5th position. What's Lewis Goff doing in the first sector? Actually, a little bit slower than the cars ahead. In the middle sector, he did a personal best and was 0.3 quicker than them, and that gap might keep coming down because Scott Lindblom now launches to the inside of Fred Green. This for the lead. He's going to squeeze the Elite Motorsport car wide, but in fairness left him just enough space. Could have put Fred Green on the grass there, but decided to leave just a Ginetta G40's width space on the outside, and that means Fred Green's back up the inside at Goddard's where he locks up, runs wide, delays Lindblom and invites Jarrett Clark back through into the race lead again. Or does he? I think they're actually going to be side by side across the line. Bit of a side draft there from Fred Green, but of course Jarrett Clark will get a push from his teammate Scott Lindblom on the outside line. I'm not sure it's going to make much difference though. Fred Green's got the preferred inside line into Redgate Corner, is late enough on the brakes to get to the apex first, and should be able to get the lead back again. Lindblom gives him a shove now coming out of the corner. This is proper touchy-feely stuff, but Fred Green I think has reasserted his position at the front of the pack. Can he turn it to the left-hander? Yes, he can. And so Green back to the lead. Lindblom 2nd, Clark 3rd. third, Cronin and Byrne debating fourth, and George Proud-Fernalda having a very different experience this morning than he had yesterday afternoon, where he led every lap pretty much. Well, he did lead every lap and led by quite some distance for most of it until the very last corner. Now he's got a grandstand view of this almighty battle going on in front of him, but hasn't really been much of a factor in this battle, George Proud-Fernalda. I don't think he's yet made it into the top three for any considerable amount of time. We'll see, maybe he's just biding his time. He's got an opportunity here, hasn't he, I think, to get a good exit from Coppice Corner, because again, they all stacked up on the apex. Fred Green is possibly going to be a sitting duck here down the straight. Now, does Lindblom go to the outside, confident that he'll have some assistance from Jarrett Clark? The answer is no, look. He gives the bumper instead to Fred Green, maybe trying to make Fred arrive at the chicane faster than he wants to go. But Green has spent enough time leading these races this year that he knows how to handle the pressure. I reckon Lewis Goff is almost with them, by the way. In the first sector, he matched the leaders. The middle sector, though, he was about 3/4 of a second quicker. And yes, Lewis Goff is now a 7th car in this group. Another looking for a debut victory this season. So 7 of them absolutely together. And how Fred Green is fending them all off, I don't really know. This is about the longest any one driver has managed to stay in the lead of the race so far. That's a big, big, big squeeze from Cronin. Jarrett Clark won't like that, but had no choice but to back out of it. Otherwise, contact could have caused calamity at Goddard's. And he settles back in behind him. Down across the timing line we go then. 7 cars for the lead. Lewis Goff, look, is already starting to make his presence felt, forcing Torin Byrne to defend. And George Proud-Fernalda might well go around the outside as well. I think both he and Goff are carrying some damage, aren't they? Proud-Fernalda's front bodywork is definitely loose. That won't have helped the aerodynamics down the straight, and maybe that's what made it a little bit easier for Lewis Goff to pick up another position. Lewis Goff, massively, massively impressive. Only debuted with us at Brands Hatch 2 events ago, so he is not a full season driver, and doing a phenomenal job in this, his 3rd ever race meeting. Definitely some damage to the front of that car, but it's not slowing him down. And Lewis Goff is potentially on course for a really good result. What would definitely be a first podium if he could get into the top 3. Could he even yet challenge for a race win? Scott Lindblom is challenging for a race win. It's remarkable, really, to think that Scott hasn't won a race, because he's been, again, one of the regular front-runners all year long. I know his teammate Rocco Coronel did a lot of winning, but in my head, I was convinced that Scott had won a race. But no, 7 podium finishes, none of them on the top step. Is that going to change today? He'll have to find a way past Fred Green. And the trouble is, if he goes for a move, it's very likely to open the door for 3rd place man Colin Cronin. I think that was George Proud-Fernalda going wide at the chicane further back. But yes, Lindblom is now in a similar situation, really, to that of Fred Green yesterday, in that he's got cars either side of him that aren't teammates. Jarrett Clark is a teammate, and he is now busy distracting Colin Cronin as they go side by side for 3rd place down the hill. Fred Green, ultra defensive into the corner. That really stacks up Scott Lindblom, but he was able to hang on to 2nd position. What's going on behind, meanwhile? Torin Byrne's bodywork, I think, is now loose at the front as well, as Torin defends 5th position. But that battle going on behind is allowing the leading quartet to get away, isn't it? Yes, Torin Byrne's car definitely has the front bodywork at an odd angle. It's designed that way, really, to try and deter them from making too much front-to-rear contact. It's side-by-side contact that's doing it, though, isn't it? Lewis Goff is 5th now. Lewis Goff into 5th position. Started 10th, but I think he lost a few positions in the opening lap, and that maybe is where he sustained the damage. As Torin Byrne, despite that flapping bodywork, surely can't see where he's going, and yet he was still trying to attack Lewis Goff. Ends up leaving the door open to George Proud-Fernalda. Goff runs wide, and they're 3, maybe 4 abreast down the hill. That won't work. Somebody will have to back out of this. None of them have, and Torin Byrne ends up squeezed onto the grass, nearly loses control. Who was that came through? That was Bartle, wasn't it? Came through on the inside of all of them and gained about 4 positions in one go. Where did Bartle come from? And Josh Watts, I think, is in that group as well. Yes, Josh Watts in the all-white car, number 22. Another one who started at the back of the grid. 20th Josh Watts began this race, and a bit like this man, Colin Cronin, he has just methodically picked his way through the order. A podium might be out of the question now for anyone in that 2nd group, but a top 5 is definitely possible for the likes of Josh Watts from the back of the grid. This is for a podium position, meanwhile. Jarrett Clark nipping up the inside of Colin Cronin, but Colin able to hang on. That has, though, allowed the top 2 to get away. I don't know what's happened between Cronin and Clark on this lap, but they've really delayed each other, and it means that Fred Green and Scott Lindblom are a country mile ahead in Ginetta Junior racing terms. That might not last, though, because Green is defending into the chicane. Lindblom didn't really get the exit that he wanted there, though, and so Fred Green hangs on. Please say we're going to get another lap. Yes, we are, aren't we? One more lap to go. And it is one of those races you really don't want to end. A bit like yesterday's Ginetta Junior encounter, except this time we've got a genuine fight for the race win. At the moment, seemingly, Fred Green and Scott Lindblom are the two main protagonists, but if they really start knocking lumps out of each other on the final lap, then Cronin and Clark are not that much further behind. So, through Goddard's we go. Fred Green leads, British driver ahead of Swedish driver Scott Lindblom, Irishman Cronin and Aussie Jarrett Clark. 4 nationalities represented in these top 4 positions as well. And they are 2 by 2 across the line. Look, Lindblom peaking to the outside of Fred Green. And then behind, another elite car defending from our racing car. Colin Cronin keeping Jarrett Clark at bay. Then it is the very impressive Harry Bartle. And this side-by-side battle behind between those with limited visibility. Fred Green, though, defending from Lindblom. How successfully is he defending, though? Lindblom to the outside. That's the inside for the left-hander. If you can get across in front of car 51 before the old hairpin, he'll have the lead. But he can't. Fred Green stands his ground, keeps the inside line. And once again, sort of Teflon-coated is Fred Green in this one. No matter what they throw at him, he just will not yield this race lead, and Scott Lindblom's going to have to try again. His next opportunity is at McLean's. I'm not convinced he'll be able to get up the inside, certainly not because Fred Green covers the inside line, and again just needs to make sure he parks the car on the apex, doesn't run wide on the exit. Has he run wide? Yes, he has. Lindblom's up the inside, Lindblom's on the grass, a big squeeze from Fred Green, and that will now very much invite Cronin and Clark back into the party. So 4 of them together onto the back straight. That will not have pleased Scott Lindblom because it looked as though he was alongside fair and square. He'll try and get a bit of a slipstream now down the exhibition straight and maybe put the moves on the race leader into the chicane. Very defensive from Green. This will slow him down on corner exit. Surely, can Lindblom get a better exit from the chicane this time than he did a lap ago? Well, sort of, but Fred Green's just driving around the inside edge of the track. Look at Clark. Jarrett Clark with so much more momentum off the corner. No one wants to go to the outside line, though. Clark is free to do so because he's at the back of the group. Fred Green will stamp on the brakes, hold the inside line through the Melbourne hairpin, and now there is just one more opportunity for Scott Lindblom to launch an attack, and I don't think he's close enough. As we head towards the Goddard's hairpin, I reckon Fred Green might have done enough here to hang on to another race victory. Lindblom tries to close, can't get there. Keep an eye on Bartle in 5th as well with a mega run through the final turn. He's not quite going to get there. Fred Green somehow manages to hold them all off and claim another race victory, his 8th of the year, and that was a really well-deserved one. What a defensive drive that was. It was a bit dramatic at times, driving around the inside of the road, and I'm sure Scott Lindblom might have some things to say to him about that squeeze up between McLean's and Coppers, but it was a very entertaining race, and Fred Green a deserved race victor, and well, he might not be ending 2025 with the championship, but he is at least going to continue this fantastic streak of really good results that he had. Won all 3 races at Croft. He also won the final race at Brands Hatch, so that was 4 wins in a row. Was second yesterday, and now back to the top step of the podium again in race number 2, with one more to come later on this afternoon. So Fred Green gets himself another race victory and defended magnificently there from not only Scott Lindblom but a whole group of drivers who were there trying to find a way past him. Lindblom ends up again in 2nd place. Colin Cronin in 3rd gets his 2nd podium finish of the year, with Jarrett Clark, Harry Bartle and Lewis Goff next. Bartle and Goff, like Cronin really, charging through very impressively. So did Josh Watts in 7th. George Proudfoot-Nalder will be disappointed, I think, with 8th, ahead of Torrin Byrne and Max Cuthbert, with Josh Henry, Revy Lake, Noah Young, Henry Cameron, Matthew Chihuahua, Ethan Carney, Andrew Robinson and Vladislav Tomanchuk, the last of the finishers. The second Ginetta Junior race of the weekend took place without the champion-elect Rocco Coronel, who has elected to sit out the final 2 races of the season with the title wrapped up yesterday. That allowed Torrin Byrne to start from pole position and lead uncontested into Redgate Corner, but that was the only time across the entire 20 minutes that anybody would lead uncontested. It was just one of those races in the Ginetta Junior Championship where there was action at every turn. It began at turn 1 for Andrew Robinson, who was tapped into a spin but was able to recover without further damage. The first attack against Torrin Byrne came from Jarrett Clark up at Coppice Corner, but that allowed George Proudfoot-Nalder, the nearly man from race 1, to get into the race lead. That didn't last though. By the time we got to the Melbourne hairpin, Clark was ahead. Jarrett, one of many drivers in this lead group looking for either a maiden victory or a maiden win. Max Cuthbert and Ethan Carney tangled at Redgate Corner. They both spun and rejoined at the back of the pack, as did Emilio Del Grosso, but after that secondary hit, his car unfortunately had to be retired to the pit lane. Then it sort of calmed down in the middle part of the race, but there were still overtakes aplenty. Fred Green nipping up the inside of Scott Lindblom and then chasing down Lindblom's teammate Jarrett Clark before moving into the lead of the race at the Melbourne hairpin. Fred was the only driver really who seemed able to successfully defend the lead for any amount of time, despite the very best efforts of Scott Lindblom to find a way past him, including this adventurous attempt at the top of the circuit at Coppice. It looked as though Jarrett Clark was going to benefit from that. He did, temporarily, but Fred Green was very quickly back to the inside and reclaimed the lead again at McLean's corner. From there, it was all about driving in his mirrors as Fred Green and the lead group left behind an almighty battle going on for fifth, which nearly ended in disaster for Torin Byrne. Fred Green, though, was able to defend successfully on the final lap and held on to claim an 8th victory of the year here at Donington.